On March 14, 2014, James McGrogan, a 39-year-old emergency room doctor, arrived at the Vail Pass trailhead in Colorado for a multi-day backcountry trip. McGrogan was an experienced outdoorsman, fit and well-equipped for the terrain. He was traveling with 3 friends toward the Eiseman Hut, a remote backcountry shelter located about 9 miles from the trailhead. Around 10 a.m., roughly 5 miles into the trek, McGrogan told his friends he was going to head further up the trail to wait for them at a higher point. He was on a split board, a snowboard that breaks down into skis for uphill travel, and moved faster than the rest of the group. When his friends reached the agreed-upon meeting point, the trail was empty. James McGrogan had vanished into one of the most heavily trafficked backcountry areas in the state. The ascent began under a clear sky, but in the high alpine, the weather is a volatile variable. By 10 a.m., the group was roughly 5 miles into their trek, navigating a section of the trail that winds toward the hut. It was here that McGrogan made a decision common among fit travelers. He decided to move ahead of his group. Because he was on a split board and possessed high cardiovascular stamina, he intended to skin ahead to a higher vantage point and wait for the others to catch up. In the vocabulary of backcountry travel, this is known as splitting the party. It is a maneuver that trades the collective safety of the group for the individual's pace. McGrogan moved up the trail and out of sight. When his 3 friends reached the designated meeting point a short time later, the trail was empty. The snow off the trail was completely untouched. He hadn't left a single boot print leading away, and there wasn't so much as a dropped glove or a scuff in the powder to suggest he'd even stepped off the path. The silence that followed was absolute. In the thin, oxygen-poor air of 11,000 feet, sound should carry for long distances, but McGrogan did not respond to calls or whistles. His companions, initially assuming he had simply pushed further toward the hut, continued their ascent. It wasn't until they reached the Eiseman Hut and found it empty that the realization set in. James McGrogan had vanished in the short window of time between 2 points on a well-marked trail. This wasn't a simple case of losing the trail. He was in a stretch of terrain that effectively funnels you forward, leaving almost no room to wander off, and yet he was gone. The geography surrounding the trail to the Eiseman Hut is rugged, but it is characterized by catch features, natural landmarks like ridges and creek beds that should funnel a lost person towards safety or a recognizable boundary. To the west lies the Booth Creek drainage, and to the east, the Vail Pass corridor. For an experienced navigator, getting lost in this area usually means drifting downhill into a drainage where you eventually hit a road or a trail. When the alarm was raised, the Eagle County Sheriff's Office initiated a massive tactical response. They didn't just send out a few rangers. More than 100 people, specialized teams from Vail and Summit County, alongside the National Guard, flooded the pass, turning the quiet trailhead into a full-scale command center. The search utilized Black Hawk helicopters equipped with forward-looking infrared technology designed to pick up the heat signature of a human body against the cold, alpine snow. However, less than 24 hours into the disappearance, a severe winter storm moved into the Gore Range. The temperature plummeted, and heavy, wet snow began to fall, accumulating in feet rather than inches. This weather shift did more than just endanger the searchers. It effectively reset the landscape. Any tracks McGrogan might have left were buried. Technology became less effective as the snow masked thermal signatures, and the K9 units, bloodhounds and air scent dogs, were stymied by the high winds and freezing moisture. For 5 days, the searchers crawled through waist-deep snow and navigated vertical terrain with a 100% failure rate. On March 19th, the active search was suspended under the assumption that McGrogan had been buried by an avalanche or had succumbed to the elements in an inaccessible location. The mystery remained cold for 18 days. On April 3rd, 2014, two backcountry skiers were traveling through the Booth Creek drainage, a valley located on the opposite side of a massive mountain ridge from where McGrogan was last seen. Near the base of a frozen waterfall, they spotted a flash of color that didn't belong in the natural palette of granite and ice. It was the body of James McGrogan, lying in a scree field at the bottom of a steep cliff. The location of the discovery immediately created a logistical and logical crisis for investigators. Booth Creek is approximately 4.5 miles from the point of his disappearance. In the context of high alpine winter travel, this distance is staggering. To reach this spot, McGrogan would have had to travel in the exact opposite direction of his destination. More importantly, he would have had to perform a feat of extreme physical exertion. He had to climb out of his original drainage, ascend a 12,000-foot ridgeline, cross over the summit of the mountain in a developing storm, and then descend the treacherous western face into a completely different valley system. For a man with a map and a GPS-enabled phone, this route makes zero tactical sense. He didn't just wander off trail. He effectively committed to a miles-long cross-mountain trek that moved him further away from help and further into the deep wilderness. Search and rescue veterans struggled to explain why a medical doctor would bypass multiple opportunities to self-correct or signal, choosing instead to climb over a literal mountain peak during a blizzard. When recovery teams reached the base of the waterfall, the physical evidence began to contradict the standard profile of a mountain casualty. The autopsy would later confirm that McGrogan died from blunt force trauma to the head and chest, consistent with a fall of approximately 100 feet from the cliffs above. While the cause of death was straightforward, the state of his gear was not. McGrogan was found without his boots. His heavy, technical snowboarding boots, essential for both warmth and movement in deep snow, were missing. This detail often brings up the theory of paradoxical undressing, a symptom of late-stage hypothermia where the victim feels a false sensation of burning heat and strips off their clothing. However, paradoxical undressing typically involves removing jackets, hats, or gloves. Removing heavy, laced snowboarding boots is a laborious task that requires significant manual dexterity, something usually lost long before the undressing phase of hypothermia begins. Furthermore, McGrogan was still wearing his socks, and they showed almost no signs of wear. In a mountain environment, if a person loses their boots and continues to walk over snow and jagged granite scree, their socks are shredded within a few hundred yards. The pristine condition of his socks suggests that he did not walk to that location without his boots. It implies he either removed them at the very top of the cliff before he fell, or they were removed by a force that left no other trace. His split board and his backpack were found in the vicinity, but they were not being used for shelter, signaling, or as a makeshift sled. The tools he needed to stay alive were sitting right next to him, untouched. The final anomaly of the James McGrogan case lies in the data recovered from his cell phone. As an ER physician, McGrogan was trained to operate under extreme stress and followed clear protocols for triage and communication. His phone was found in his pocket and was fully functional. Forensic analysis revealed that the phone had been powered on and off several times during the 18 days he was missing. At one point, the device successfully connected to a local cell tower, indicating that McGrogan had enough signal strength to attempt a 911 call or send a text message with his coordinates. Despite this, the phone's logs showed no outgoing activity. There were no calls, no unsent drafts, and no emergency signals. This creates a profound logic gap. If McGrogan was conscious and mobile enough to power his phone on and off, and mobile enough to climb over a 12,000-foot ridge, he was conscious enough to know he was in a life-threatening situation. The decision to remain silent on his only communication device while performing a grueling, miles-long trek suggests a state of mind that had entirely decoupled from reality. Whether this was caused by an initial minor head injury, the early stages of high-altitude cerebral edema, or a total cognitive collapse remains a matter of speculation. The case was officially closed as an accidental fall, but the why remains a void. James McGrogan, a man who spent his life studying the mechanics of survival, died in a way that ignored every rule of the craft. He moved through the Colorado backcountry like a person who had forgotten how to be a human, leaving behind his group, his boots, and his logic, only to be found at the base of a waterfall in a place he never should have been.